Yeah, so I saw it yesterday, and it's really funny. It was great. And I was wondering just how, with an American director approaching Jane Austen, like how does like an Irish production company like yours get involved in it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was lucky, I think. Whit had become quite familiar with Ireland actually because his daughter was studying in Trinity College. He's lived in Europe for a lot of his life. He first in Barcelona and now in Paris. And so he had this Jane Austen project that he'd been writing kind of on spec himself while he was, between other projects or trying to get other bigger films off the ground. And I think it was the film board at one stage knew that he was kind of coming over, and they offered to do a few days of location recce's. And then he was also invited down to the Galway Film Flat. So actually, the first time that I met him was down at the Galway Film Flat in 2010. Myself and Kieran, who's my business partner in Blinder Films, and we got on very well then. And he said he had this project in mind, but it was kind of early days. So we kind of kept in touch. And anytime he was in New York, actually at that point, anytime I was in New York, I would get in touch with him. We would have a coffee, and then he went off and made Damsels in Distress. So I think it was kind of when he was coming to the end of in post production on Damsels that he was thinking again about trying to get Love and Friendship off the ground. And in 2013, he finally sent me a script, and it went from there.
Well, because that kind of leads on to I was going to ask about how we attract films to Ireland these days, and like projects like this. I mean, it sounds like it was a lot of work put in terms of networking at the film festivals, or just sort of like what is being done at the moment, as opposed to just attract movies to shoot in Ireland, and like what is it that Ireland has to offer as a location?
Well, I think it has a number of things to offer. Definitely that, that is true. Networking for the film industry in general, whether it's our own, like Irish, whether it's our own films and Irish talent that we're trying to get financed, it's absolutely imperative that you kind of go and network and go to all the markets and try and raise money from other countries, because we're not really able to fully finance a film unless it's extremely low budget in Ireland alone. But for the Irish Film Board, definitely do great work in terms of like trying to sell Ireland as a film location. And I suppose Whit would have been aware, we would have made him aware of other films, and particularly other Jane Austen films that would have shot in Ireland. And actually, initially, I mean, one of the things the Irish Film Board does is some recce support, early recce support for projects that are considering Ireland as a location. So Whit got a few days with the location manager, and they took him around to some period locations, and quite a few of those spots were things that he immediately saw and was like, well, this is definitely, I know that this film can work here. And then I think in terms of what Ireland has to offer for to entice production over here, obviously English language, so for English language films, American or UK, we have that to offer, but also incredibly skilled crews and cast, and then obviously really good shooting locations, and a huge variety of shooting locations. But I think particularly for this period of an English set film, obviously we have really good locations to offer, and we filmed in a number of places for the film for Love and Friendship. We shot in Newbridge House. And then we also shot in Howth Castle, and around North Great George's Street, and we also used Westborough House.
Yeah, I'd actually made a note of those locations, because I mean the locations were quite good in the movie, and I mean I had a practical question about what it's like filming in these places, and being sure you respect the like historical and physical integrity of the buildings when you have these film crews going in. Like, is there any advice for like how to shoot in locations like that, or how to get permission and so on?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were fortunate. We had a really amazing location manager in Colin Nolan, and we also had a really brilliant production designer, Anna Rackard. And so, and we did a lot of very early meetings with the location owners, because obviously, when there's kind of, historical houses and, antiques there, you have to be extremely careful, because a film crew, as you know, is upwards of, 40 people. So I think it was kind of very early conversations and very clear plans in terms of what rooms that were out of bounds, and then we just made sure that we cleared away things that were kind of precious objects. But actually in Howth Castle, a lot of the in one of the rooms in particular, we were able to use a lot of the furnishings from the room. So I think it's just a very early dialogue, and obviously very healthy production insurance in case anything goes wrong, that we were lucky enough for that not to happen.
This movie also stands out because I suppose it's a Jane Austen adaptation, but as I was watching it, I was thinking it was more like Oscar Wilde, and then when I was reading the press notes, Wish made that comparison himself.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, it is kind of a find because it's one of her lesser known novels, and would this be like a good approach for filmmakers to take to see what older novels there are that are out of copyright, and like what's a good way of sort of adapting them now for a modern audience?
Well, I think Whit, I think it was really brilliantly spotted by Whit to adapt this novella. It's actually one of Jane Austen's very early works. It's in epistolary form, so it takes the form of letters. And actually, he changed the title, so the novel is actually called Lady Susan. Though Jane Austen did actually have another work called Love and Friendship, and he decided to take that title.
Oh, that's confusing. Okay.
Yeah, well, the reason was actually, so she had 3 novellas early in her career that were written in this form. 2 of those she returned to, and one of them became Pride and Prejudice, and I believe the other one became Sense and Sensibility. But she never returned to Lady Susan, and so I guess and actually she had set the title herself. It was her nephew that published it. After Jane Austen had passed away, and so I think Whit felt, well, maybe if she had returned to it herself, she might have also retitled it. And I think it kind of does open up, it opens up the world a bit more in terms of all the range of characters in the film, because it's a big range of characters that obviously centre around our lead character, that is Lady Susan. But I suppose maybe because it was in the form of letters, it was possibly seen as something that would be very difficult to adapt to screen, because obviously letters are, by definition it means that the 2 characters are not in the same space, but obviously for film you need to be able to kind of realise scenes and drama and action. So I think it was actually an incredibly skillful adaptation on Whit's part.
So would a lot of the dialogue have been lifted directly from the letters in the format of the book?
Yeah, there was really quite a lot that Whit took from the book. He would have probably maybe made things more concise. There was a few characters that he invented. Well, in particular, Mrs. Cross, played by Kelly Campbell. She was an invention. That's the friend who helps pack and unpack and that sort of thing. And the function of her was to again, it was trying to solve the problem of these letters. So it was someone that Lady Susan could actually kind of communicate to, and make scenes come to life, I guess.
Well, I'm studying screenwriting lately, and we spend a long time talking about the main character and having the audience invested in them. Lady Susan is played very well by Kate Beckinsale, and it's very funny to watch her, but she is such a cow, and it's kind of like what's the approach to the story where you can follow a character who's like really conniving and like not as like this definitely isn't like a sort of like moral. It doesn't have a moral point as much as Austen's other work, and the main character like does some pretty nasty things, yet it's still sort of compelling to watch. So like what do you think it is about the movie where it's still enjoyable to watch?
Well, but that's what I really, really love about it. I love that it's a film that doesn't actually hold judgment on women.
Yeah.
Like, on a woman who, effectively, I guess, has her cake and eats it too. And, she never gets her comeuppance. And actually, you could say, apart from the character of Lady Mannering, no one is really badly served by her actions. And I think it was very smart in his casting of the absolutely amazing Jen Murray in the role of Lady Mannering, because I think obviously if we had someone in that role who couldn't do such an amazing comic turn, we might have felt extreme sympathy for them. And if we did, that probably might have, given us a different opinion of Lady Susan. But I think it was an interesting thing, actually, whenever we were trying to get finance for the film and, pitching it to people and having people read the script. Certainly one of the comments that came back was, we're not going to like this character, but Kate, I think, just did such an amazing turn with her performance, and I think Whit always knew that it's like if we love her and we love her actions and her conniving, and we see that she does have a close friendship with one woman in her life, which is the character played by Chloe Sevigny, Mrs. Johnson, that hopefully we're going to love her too, and I certainly do, and I hope audiences do.
No, well, I loved Chloe Sevigny. In general, I have a marriage proposal for her. If you can pass it on, I'd appreciate that. Her character and she'd actually worked with Kate and Whit on a previous movie, so it's kind of like fun for them to sort of get to work together again. I mean, was there a good dynamic between them, like from the previous experience they had working together?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it was really amazing. I mean, Whit has worked with Chloe since on another project, which was The Cosmopolitans, and actually on Last Days of Disco, which is the film you're referring to, their first film, he had written the role with Kate in mind, having seen her in a film that she did called Cold Comfort Farm. So I think it's absolutely brilliant that we were able to kind of get them back together again, and I think it was a really lovely and enjoyable reunion for them as well.
But was the character Miss Johnson made American for the movie? Was this so Savigny could be cast, or was it because Wish had identified something I was reading about in the press notes, which was that there were all these kind of American exiles immediately after the War of Independence who had sided with the British, and I was kind of thinking, yeah, I haven't seen much about that in movies actually. So I mean, like, what drew him to sort of exploring that?
Yeah, no, that was exactly it. I mean, I think he studied history actually in college, so I think he finds that extremely interesting. And also, I suppose he felt for an American audience, it would be quite fun to be able to get some jokes in about people being scalped, etc.
There was another thing in the press notes I was looking over, is just that apparently the scene where the character is confused about Sir Martin is confused about the 12 commandments rather than 10 commandments, and it. Was it your idea, or was it a conversation that emerged that it would be a funnier spin on that, say, or where did that come from?
It was unwittingly my idea. I hope I'm not as bad as Sir James Martin, but we had been shooting for quite a number of days, so I was very, very tired. And there's a lot of references to the Bible, obviously, in the film. And myself and Whit were on set one morning. And we were discussing a scene, and I happened to mention in conversation the 12 commandments. Obviously, immediately knew that I'd said the wrong thing, but Whit just exploded in laughter and was just like, "That's hilarious! That's hilarious! Can I use it?" And I was like, "Okay, of course." And then a few days later, this absolutely hilarious but mortifying for me scene came along, and I'm proud to be immortalized somewhat in the film.
The scene feels so organic to me. I assumed that this was a thing from the novella where it was like this guy was ditzy and got confused, and so I mean that worked quite well. I thought so.
The thing is, Tom Bennett is he's just an incredible actor, and I am so pleased for him, because so many of the reviews have been like highlighting his performance, and it's so well deserved. He's an absolute genius. Like, even when we did the read through, it was Tom couldn't make it over for the read through, so we had him on Skype on screen. And always those things, people are just getting to know each other and they're a little bit nervous. And when he started doing his thing, he literally came on Skype with this incredible character and had the entire room absolutely in stitches. And Whit he's an amazing, because he's a writer and director, he's able to do this, but like, he literally would write new scenes. He wrote, I'd say, 3 or 4 new scenes for Sir James Martin while we were shooting. He'd get up really early in the morning and these pages would come through.
Oh, okay.
One of them was the 12 Commandments.
Oh, that's great. And again, like I was saying about Kate Beckinsale, like she was just cast so well, where an actor who otherwise could be quite annoying was like ends up being very enjoyable to watch. And it was the same with Tom Bennett, I thought. Like Like with your role as a producer, would you often have creative input like that directly affects what happens in the movie, or like is it more of a organizational role, or could you talk a bit about how that worked on this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it really varies, obviously, from project to project. There's always some creative input, on a film like this with Whit. I mean, he is just such a singular filmmaker. He's the writer director. He has such a clear creative vision, so he'll always solicit feedback, and we would always give it. But it's not as needed as it might be in other scenarios. In other scenarios, I'd be incredibly involved. It could even sometimes be coming up with an idea, bringing the writer on board, and being very involved in the scripting process or the casting process. So it really, I really enjoy that side of things. But I think it just, it varies on a project to project basis. Obviously with documentaries, I did The Queen of Ireland with Conor Horgan, and on that it was, there was a huge collaboration obviously the whole way through in terms of the shaping of the story. And so it depends on what the project needs. And but and also it's hard managing your time sometimes, because you're also completely involved in getting the finance closed and managing the budget and other crewing things. So you can be pulled in so many different directions when you're producing.
Would you recommend writers look for out of copyright works and see if there's anything they can adapt and bring a new spin to? Or
yeah, definitely. I think it's about finding material that you feel has kind of, has some resonance or hasn't been seen before, and if you feel you can do something with it. I think what's so surprising to so many people about this film is, like, apparently there's been, I mean, I've been learning myself through all the reviews, there's been about 60 adaptations, film and TV adaptations of Jane Austen's work, so it's kind of amazing that this is like a new one that's added to the canon, and by someone, because Whit is a massive Jane Austen fan, but also I think that it's a film that's actually, it really feels very modern in some ways, and also I think it feels like a very, very guy-friendly Jane Austen movie because it is so funny. So yeah, I think it's brilliant that it's kind of adding something different. But yeah, definitely, because there's such amazing writers out there, such incredible stories, it's a brilliant resource to mine for budding writers, I would say.
I wanted to just ask one more question because of the recent news stories about the Department of the Arts being combined with another department, and a lot of creative people in Ireland took exception to this, and like notably Lenny Abrahamson criticised the decision, and he felt there was a sort of I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that just the idea that the government will pay lip service to the arts, but then like at crucial moments where they could actually provide support, they seem to fall short. I was wondering, does the Irish Film Board have a take on this yet, or is there something they would like to see happen in terms of this approach the government's taking?
Well, obviously the Irish Film Board have, speaking as a board member, the Irish Film Board have, since the cuts that we experienced in 2008, we've been calling for a restoration of funding to our, the pre-crisis levels, and I think that the argument that we have to make really strongly, and I hope has started to be listened to, because there were small increases in the last couple of years back to the Film Board, and I know, in the programme for government that has been explicitly stated that one of the things they're looking to do is increase funding to the Irish Film Board, but is that the massive importance of the restoration of funding. I thought Liam Neeson was great when he spoke at the IFTAs about 12 million is seed funding, and what Lenny was saying, which is really important, is that actually the fruits of the labour that we're seeing now were because of the time that we had the 20 million. So it would just be terrible if people were thinking, should they have 12 million now? And they're doing brilliantly, because it's such a long time it takes to develop people's careers and to develop projects. So I think that's really important. But I think that there's also a really necessary conversation to be had around the wider support of the arts. So it's like, even if the Film Board is getting increases, it's like it's important for the arts to be supported across the board. And when you look at the per GDP support for the arts in Europe against the EU average, it's like shockingly low. It's incredibly low, particularly as we're a country and a culture that takes such massive pride in our artists, and that our artists do, I would say, proportionally incredibly well abroad. So I think, it's something that really needs to be looked at, and I hope it's taken very seriously.
Would a devoted government department for arts and communications help that, or?
Yeah, I think that would be a terrific step. Yeah.
Very well. We should follow what's happening with that. Katie Holly, thank you very much for joining Film Ireland.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thanks very much.